Good evening, and welcome to Torah Sparks, which will feature just different tidbits, sparks, not lengthy essays or discourses on the Torah portion, this week being the portion of Toldos. But before we start, I just want to mention that today is a very special day. It's Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the first head of the month of Kislev. Every Rosh Chodesh is special, but this one is extra special because this is the day, 39 years ago, that the Rebbe was allowed to go home from his heart attack, and he experienced a full recovery, so it's celebrated by Hasidim to this day as a major day of joy and celebration. And some of the sparks that we'll be discussing today are gleaned from the Rebbe's teachings. The Torah portion is called Toldos. Toldos means children or generations. And it starts off by saying, these are the Toldos, these are the generations or the children of Yitzchak, Isaac, ben Avraham, the son of Abraham. As if we didn't know yet that Isaac was the son of Abraham. We read it previously. But it's not enough. The Torah then says, Avraham, holed is Yitzchak. Abraham fathered Yitzchak. Now, isn't it obvious that if you are the son of your father, that the father is the father of you? So the Torah just goes out of its way to repeat itself. So Rashi addresses this question, and Rashi says that Yitzchak's relationship with Abraham was called into question. There were cynics who were saying, we're not so sure, Abraham, a man of 100 years old, being a father, that Sarah was abducted by Abimelech, and she probably conceived from him. Although, of course, the bigger miracle was for Sarah at the age of 90 having a child, and Abraham at the age of 100 having a child. And but that's a separate issue. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But that's Rashi's explanation, that Rashi says that's why the Torah has to tell us. You should know that Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, Abraham fathered Yitzchak, not anyone else. The Torah is trying to reinforce that. But in a Hasidic context, in a mystical, spiritual context, these four names, Yitzchak, son of Abraham, Abraham fathered Yitzchak, talks about four levels of our relationship with God. Abraham personified the trait of love. Isaac personified the trait of awe. And this is how it works. The first thing, the lowest level of relationship with God is Yitzchak. The lower level of awe, which is fear. Why do I do the right thing? I'm afraid not to do it. I'm afraid of the consequences. That's Yitzchak. That's called in the Hasidic jargon, Yira Tata'a. It's Aramaic for the lower level of Yira, lower level of fear. I'm motivated by fear of punishment, fear of hurting myself, or whatever it is, but it's a lower level. It's a basic level. But then there's a higher level, Avraham. Avraham is love. I serve God out of love, because God is a source of life for me. God is the source of goodness, so I love him. That's higher than fear. Then we go to a higher level yet. Avraham, again repeated the word Avraham, gives birth to Yitzchak. This is a higher level of love. There's a level of love which is a very selfish level of love. I love because I'm getting something out of it. It's a quid pro quo love. God gives me good things. He gives me health. He gives me prosperity. He gives me all the nice things in life. So I'm grateful to God. I love him. He loves me, so I love him. That's a lower. That's called Ahava Zuta, the small, miniature love. Then we reach Yitzchak. Then we reach Avraham, the higher level of love. Skip that. The higher level of love, where you don't love because of what you get from it, you love God because he's God. That's a much higher level. It's an altruistic level. It's an idealistic level. That's called Ahava Rabbah, the great love. That's not the highest level. You see, this is where the novelty of the Hasidic approach comes in. Most people would tell you, if you ask them, what's the highest level of serving God? It's when you have this unconditional love for Him. Just like the love of a child to a parent or a parent to a child. So the Torah says no. The next level is Yitzchak, is awe. Yira ilah, the upper level of Yira. It means a state of total submission to God, total, what they call self-abnegation, total self-effacement. You're in the presence of God where your whole ego is completely nullified, because even the highest level of love has a measure of ego. There's the one who loves. So there's you and the object of your love, and you love, even though it's selfless love, but love by definition has a sense of self. We should all be at that level, and we'd be doing very well to be doing at the level of Ahava Rabbah. But that's not the highest level. The highest level is Yira Ilah, the higher level of Yira, of awe, being in total awe and just being overwhelmed by God's presence. And of course, most people cannot reach that level all the time. Maybe very few people reach it all the time, but sometimes we can have a little bit of a glimpse, a little bit of a taste of that level in certain experiences where we're in total awe and our whole being is like swallowed up and lost in this greater awareness of God. Getting back to Rashi, the simple explanation. Why does the Torah repeat that Abraham fathered Yitzchak to dispel the critics or the cynics that would laugh and say, Yitzchak is not Abraham's son, Yitzchak is Avimelech's son. So what did God do? Rashi says. Rashi asks rhetorically, what did God do? How do you stop these cynics? So Rashi says God formed Isaac's face to be just like Abraham. He was a spitting image of his father. So everyone realized that he must be a son of Abraham. So the Rebbe asks, for a child to look like a father, it doesn't require a great miracle. A child looking like the father is a very natural thing. Not always, you can look like your mother as well, but it's a natural thing for a child to look like the father. So why did Rashi make it sound like this was a great feat? What did God do? As if he had to really pull out all the stops to do this. So the Rebbe said it was a miracle. Why? Because Abraham personified love at the highest level. Isaac personified gvura, judgment, toughness, harshness, sternness, awe, reverence. All these are very constricted and a tightening of your personality. And there's a verse, I believe it's in Proverbs, Chachmas Adam Ta'ir Panav, the wisdom of a person shines on his face. If a person has a certain strong personality trait, you could see it on the person's face. And Abraham, whose personality trait was very strong, it was the strongest of any human being. Maybe Aaron was even greater in that regard, but certainly he's on the top echelon of people whose whole life was about love. So his face was a loving face. You looked at Abraham's face, you saw love. When you looked at Isaac's face, if things would have gone the natural way, what would you have seen? You would have seen a really stern, harsh, very tough-minded person. You would have been you would have been taken aback if you saw his face. You would jump. You would recoil, not because it was ugly, God forbid, but because it was such a strong, demanding face. So they should have looked like opposites. So what did God do? God did this miracle that he made Isaac look just like Abraham. Isaac's face was just as loving as Abraham's. Okay. So that's the introductory verse. Yitzchak was 40 years old when he married Rivka. Who was Rivka? The daughter of Besuel, the Aramean, the sister of Lavan. I mean, this genealogy is not very flattering. Her father Besuel was a wicked man. Her brother Lavan was not just wicked, but he was a real deceiver, a real criminal. So why are we telling this about Rivka? That Rivka's, you should know this great holy matriarch that we have. Look what a scoundrel her father was and her brother. So the answer is, it's to tell you how righteous she was. She was like a rose among the thorns. Look what this righteous woman, this is in chapter 25, verse 20. She's the daughter of a wicked man, the sister of a wicked man, and she lived in a wicked place. And yet she was so righteous. She didn't learn from them. That's the greatest approbation, the greatest endorsement for someone. Okay, this is going to pose a little problem. And turns out that they're married. He's 40 years old, and she's barren. She can't have a child. So Yitzchak prays opposite his wife. They both stand at opposite ends of the house, and each one prays to God. And who does God respond to? It says, and God responds to Isaac, to him. So Rashi says, to him and not to her. Why not to her? What was wrong with her prayers? So Rashi says, because you can't compare the prayer of a righteous person, the son of a righteous person, to a righteous person, the daughter of a wicked person. And that's why his prayers were preferable. Isn't there a little contradiction here? We just got finished saying that she was so special, that she came from a house of evil people, father, brother, neighbors, and that proves how unique she was. And now we're saying, but God says, no, I don't like you. You don't have any yichus. Yichus is Yiddish in Hebrew for, pedigree, and good, a good pedigree. No, I don't like her prayer. God listened to his prayer. That's a question that I think comes up very obviously. It seems to be a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction. Because righteous people never pray to God and tell him, you owe it to me. I've been serving you for so many years. I've been doing so much good. I'm so righteous. You owe it to me. Give me what I want. Tzaddik never does that. A tzaddik always asks God and says, God, you owe me nothing. I'm the lowest of the low. But God, you're so righteous. You're so benevolent. You could still give me. That's one approach. Another approach, the tzaddik will say, I'm a nobody. I don't deserve anything. But my father, my mother, they were such holy and righteous people that give it to me in their merit. And that's why when Rivka was praying, Rivka said, God, you don't owe me anything. So she didn't feel the ability, she didn't feel the right. How could she demand of God? How could she really come to God and say, God, you have to give it to me. I really want it. I have to. She was a righteous, humble woman. And she couldn't say, well, give it to me in the merit of my father Besuel, or the merit of my brother Lavan. So her prayer was not as demanding as Isaac. Isaac said, you owe it to me because of my father, because of my mother. Now she's conceiving, and her children in utero are fighting. They're twins, and they're fighting. She's having labor pains, but she doesn't know she has twins. So she says, Im Cain, if so, Lama Zanecha, why do I want to be pregnant? Why do I want to have a child? It's very strange, isn't it? This is our matriarch, Rivka, a righteous woman. She's not the first woman who had, a difficult pregnancy. We know that it's a common thing. But she somehow is so spoiled that she can't take a little bit of pain. And she's complaining why did I want to become pregnant? What's going on over here? There's something missing. That's why you need Rashi. Rashi quotes the Midrash that says that when she was going by a house of God, there was a special place called the Academy of Shem and Aver. Shem was Noah's son, Aver was Shem's grandson. They were carrying on the teachings that they got from Noah, obviously, and that was considered to be a holy place. When she passed that place, Jacob, wanted to come out, wanted to be born. He wanted to go study there. When she passed a house of idol worship, Esav wanted to go out. So she says, what's going on? Do I have a schizophrenic child? I mean, make up his mind. She said, look, if he wants to go to the yeshiva to study Torah, that's great. If he wants to go worship idols, I understand that. I come from an idol worshiping background. We'll have to work on him. There's something to work on. I know that's a challenge. But what does God expect of me if someone wants to go to both places? There's nothing I can do with a person like that. So then she finds out, no, you're having 2 children, and there's going to be a perennial struggle between them. That's how Rashi explains this. But we could also give another explanation, that the whole idea of childbirth coming along with a lot of pain, where does it come from? Why does a woman have pain when she carries the child, when she bears the child, when she raises the child? Because of Eve. Eve was the one who caused it all. That was one of the curses. But Sarah and Rebecca, all the matriarchs, reversed the curse of Chava, just like and Abraham and Isaac. They were the first ones to start reversing it. So she's saying at herself, she knew that her mother-in-law Sarah, was a righteous woman, and she started reversing it. So she's saying, what's going on? How come I'm having such severe pains? That means that the curse had not been ameliorated at all. It's as big as it was before. That's what bothered her. She said, then who am I? Then I am not the person that I thought I was. I thought I was able to change this process and reverse it, and it doesn't seem to have any effect on my physical being. And she was told that it's because she's carrying this twin potential for conflict, and that's going to be part of the future of the Jewish people. They will have to wage war, and eventually the curse will be removed, but not before Yaakov prevails over influences and he finds Esav. The question is asked. This is a little bit somewhat on the side of humor. Yaakov wanted to leave to go into a house of study. Esav wanted to go to a house of idol worship. Now we know we have a tradition that before a child is born, an angel teaches him the whole Torah. So why did Yaakov want to be born to go to an academy for learning Torah? He was already in an academy. He was studying Torah with this angel. So the way the joke goes, that he didn't want to be in the same cheder, in the same, classroom as Esav. He wanted to go be in a separate class. But the deeper understanding is that the Torah that you learn before you're born is not the Torah that you want to learn when you're born, because that's Torah that is given to you. You don't work for it. There's no effort involved. And Torah has to come with effort. You have to exert yourself. You have to apply yourself to Torah. So Yaakov, as much as he was learning in his mother's womb, he wanted to be born. He knew that his job was to put the effort into learning. Okay, now they grow up. Yaakov, why is he called Yaakov, Jacob? Because Yaakov comes from the word Akev, heel. He's holding on to Esav's heel. Esav is born first, and Yaakov was saying, no, I want to be born first. There was already that struggle even before they're born, whether it was conscious or subconscious, but there was always that struggle. And then they're born, and they grow up, and Esav is a man of hunting, man of the field. Yaakov is called Ish Tam. Tam can mean simple, but it doesn't mean simple here. It means a innocent person, someone who is not into deception, someone who's who's all about truth, all about integrity and sincerity, and he dwells in the tents. So Rashi says, what tents are we talking about? The tents of Shem and Aver, this academy that I mentioned before, that he devoted his life to studying Torah. Now you could ask, where was the Torah? The Torah hadn't been given yet, but we already discussed in earlier classes that according to our tradition, the Torah was known to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob, and they studied it. Torah was even known to Noah, and was even known to Adam. These were people whom God had revealed the teachings of the Torah in varying degrees. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob studied the Torah, and they even practiced all the commandments that they were able to practice. Okay. Yitzchak loves Esav. Why? Because he would go out hunting and bring him food. So he liked him. And Rivka loved Jacob. Now, this is very strange. Why did Yitzchak love Esav? He was a man of the field. He was a hunter. He had nothing to do with, as we'll soon see, he didn't care for the teachings of Avraham, of Abraham and Isaac. So why did he love him? Because he gave him food? Because he provided him with food? I mean, that doesn't sound befitting a man of the caliber of Isaac, a holy man, one of the holiest people that ever lived, that he loves his son Esav, and it seems that he loved him more than Yaakov, because he would provide him with food. So the real reason is the deeper reason. Sometimes the deeper reason is the real reason. Rashi says, and this is a little bit of a deeper reason, that it wasn't the food, it was his mouth. He deceived his father. He would ask his father questions of Jewish law. How do you tithe salt? How do you tithe straw? He would act like more pious than the average person. So his father was so impressed. I have a son who's a hunter, and he's still so imbued with such an awareness of doing a mitzvah. But then there's a mystical explanation. Yitzchak was a visionary. Yitzchak did not see the world the way we see it. He saw into the future. He saw beneath the surface, and he saw that Esav had sparks of holiness that were such high sparks that Yaakov didn't even have. And those sparks later on manifested themselves through his descendants who became converts to Judaism, which includes Onkelos, famous translator of the Torah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Meir, Shmaya, Avtalion, and many others of the greatest Jewish people over the ages who were his descendants. So he saw that in Esav. When he saw Esav, he saw his soul. He didn't see his body, he saw his soul. I know you have a lowly body, but I see your lofty soul. There's so much holiness embedded in you. So he thought by showing him love, that would help him actualize his potential. That was Yitzchak's reason for loving Esav. But Rivka loved Jacob because she already had experience with very lofty souls who were scoundrels. She knew that you can't just shower them with love and hope that they're going to actualize the potential. You have to put your emphasis on Yaakov, on the whole holy people, and through them you will be able to actualize the good in others. And this will come back again at the end of the Parsha about the blessings that Yitzchak wanted to give his son Esav, and Rivka said no, Yaakov should get those blessings. Anyhow, Yaakov was cooking lentils. Very strange story. Who cares what he's cooking? I mean, but he's cooking lentils, and Esav comes from the field and he's weary. And Esav says to Yaakov, this is in verse 30, dump some of these red stuff down my throat. Very refined way of speaking. Because I'm weary. And that's why he was called red. Because lentils are red. Although the lentils that I saw are not red. But I guess in those days the lentils were red. Some say raw lentils are red, but when they're cooked they change color. But anyhow, he says, I want to eat these lentils. So Yaakov says, sell me as the day your firstborn right to me. Sell me your firstborn right, your birthright. And Esau says, look, I'm going to die. Why do I need the birthright? So Yaakov says, swear to me as the day. And he swore to him, and he sold his birthright. Yaakov gives him bread and lentils. He ate, he drank, he got up, he left, and he disgraced the birthright. I just want to mention that there's an anti-Semitic twist on this. Anti-Semites always love to go back to the Bible to prove how bad Jews are. The Jews, who's their progenitor? Yaakov, Jacob. Esau is the progenitor of the other nations of the world. Look how much nicer we are. Esau is so respectful of his father. He's constantly giving his father food. Yaakov is this arrogant scholar who sits in a tent, and then his poor brother is dying. He says, I'm dying. Give me some of those lentils. First, sell me your birthright. Isn't that cruel? Isn't that insensitive? And they take the word, they mistranslate the word. When he says, sell me as the day, it doesn't say sell me first, but if you look in the King James Bible, they translated, sell me first your birthright. And Jacob said, if you don't sell me the birthright, I will not give you the food. I'll let you die. Isn't that nice? But that's not what it says here. This is a complete distortion of what it says. Jacob doesn't say, I won't give you the food. He says, I want you to sell me the birthright. And Esau says, okay, I have no need for it. But what was really going on? Why did Yaakov want to take the birthright from him at this point? So this is the background that is crucial to understand what's going on. Why was Yaakov cooking lentils? Why is it even relevant to the story? If he was cooking pizza or sushi, you don't cook sushi, but if he was cooking, cholent or whatever it is that he's making, why is it important to tell us that he's cooking lentils? So the answer is, in the oral tradition, lentils is the food that you feed mourners. Nowadays the custom is to give them eggs. Mourners get eggs, as eggs don't have a mouth to them, just like a mourner is grief-stricken and he can't open his mouth because of grief. Also, it's a cycle, but whatever it is, lentils was the choice food to give mourners. Who are the mourners? Yitzchak. Isaac was mourning whom? The death of Abraham. Abraham died that very day. Why did he die that day? He was only 175 years old. And he was supposed to live to 180, because God said, I'm going to make you live a life where you will only see good. You will not have any bad things happening in your life anymore. That day that Abraham died, Esau went on a crime spree. He went out, he committed murder, adultery, and other stuff. And because of that, God says, I don't want Abraham to see how evil his grandson has become. So this is the day that Abraham passes away, the paragon of virtue, the greatest, most loving person, devoted to God in the extreme, and Isaac as well. And what does the son do? Doesn't come to the funeral, isn't interested in his grandfather, and he goes out on a crime spree. And he's so tired, he's almost dead because he committed murder. It's not easy to commit a murder. And he says, give me some of these lentils. Isn't there irony? The lentils are the symbol of the death of Abraham, and he's saying, give me those lentils. Just dump it down my throat. So Yaakov was so disgusted by this. He says, how could you be the heir to Abraham and Isaac? The heir is not just someone who inherits their estate. The heir is someone who inherits their legacy. He says, you have just so disgraced your family. It's bad enough that you committed crimes, but you have no shame, you have no guilt, you have no respect. So he says, sell me the birthright. I'll take the birthright. And he says, yeah, you can keep it. I don't care for it. And that's why Yaakov asked him to sell it, not as a precondition to giving him the food, but as a way of saving the birthright. It shouldn't be squandered in a man like Esau. Okay, then Torah continues telling us that Yitzchak, because of famine, had to move. It comes to the place of the Philistines. His wife, Rebecca, was taken by Avimelech, the king. Same story that happened to Sarah. Same thing, the same story from beginning to end. And in the end, God reveals himself to Avimelech and tells him, you took this married woman. And he complains to Isaac, you told me that this was your sister. And Isaac says, yeah, I would be killed if I would tell you it's my wife. This is just an interesting thing, that whatever happens to Abraham happens to Isaac. Maybe in some details are different, but basically he replicated many of the things of his father. Another thing that he replicated was the wells. In chapter 26, verse 15, all the wells that his father's servants dug in the days of Abraham, the Plishtim, the Philistines, plugged them. And then he digs other wells, and the shepherds of the Philistines quarrel with Abraham, with Isaac's shepherds, claiming the wells belong to them. Then he digs another well and another well. Finally, they don't argue about the last well that he built. What is this well digging all about? Why is Isaac digging wells? And again, let's say he dug wells because that was the way he earned a living, by supplying water. Why is that important? Why would the Torah tell us this? The Torah is so economical in teaching us some valuable laws, sometimes telling us a single law by virtue of one word or one letter. And here the Torah is telling us about his well digging company. And these are not oil wells, so this is just water wells.
He's looking to find himself.
That's right. So Chassidus explains that what he did physically was really paralleled what he was going on spiritually. He was digging in himself, because Abraham was chesed, was kindness. Abraham was extroverted. He was going out of himself, sharing everything he had with others, teaching, feeding, giving to others, calling out to the whole world. Yitzchak was the next level. The next level was to start internalizing it. We don't find that Isaac had as many followers as Abraham. Abraham was a very popular person, because anyone who is so extroverted and so charismatic and is constantly talking and doing kindness will get a lot of followers. Isaac, I think it says in the Medrash, lost a lot of his father's followers. But so that did he cause a reversal of Abraham's ideals? No. He took it to the next level. You can't just superficially recognize that there's a God. You have to internalize it. You have to start digging in yourself to get rid of the earth that covers, to find the water, to find the true spiritual energy within you. So that's what Yitzchak's life is all about. It revolves around digging. Then he makes a treaty with Avimelech. Esav marries some wives that are idolatrous. Isaac and Rivka are very, very upset. That's in verse 35. Then we pick up in chapter 27. Yitzchak is old. His eyes are dim. He was not able to see. And he summons his older son, Esau. And he says, I'm old. I don't know when I'm going to die. Get your tools, your sword, and your bow and arrow. Go out to the field and hunt some venison for me, and prepare some food the way I like it, and I'll bless you before I die. Rivka overhears this, so she calls her son Yaakov and says, I just overheard your father tell your brother to go out and hunt. I'm going to prepare some food the way your father likes it, and you will get the blessing. And Yaakov says, how can I do that? My father will feel me. I don't have any hair. My skin is very smooth. And Esau was very hairy. He'll know right away that I'm lying, and he'll curse me. Instead of a blessing, I'll get a curse. And his mother says, the curse is on me. Listen to what I'm telling you. And that's what he does. She prepares the food, and he brings it to the father. Why was Rivka so sure that nothing bad will happen? Why did she tell her son to risk his life? Because you have to realize that if Yitzchak would have cursed him, that would have been the end. He would have lost everything, if not in this world and in the future world. Everything would have been lost. So one commentary says something very interesting. Esav, even though he was not a nice person, even though he was a violent person, even though he was a evil person, he had one redeeming quality that Yaakov did not have. What was that?
He was a good hunter. He gets some medicine.
Something better than that. The devotion to his parents. To the point where he had to risk his life when he went out hunting. It's a matter of, some people could die, especially if you're a vice president. You're hunting with your vice president, and then you get into trouble. But there is some danger, very strong privilege and merit. So how do you overcome that? So Rivka says, I want you to show me self-sacrifice. You're going to endanger your own life because you might get a curse, but you're willing to do it because I told you to do it. And that self-sacrifice for honoring your mother will counter Esav's self-sacrifice for honoring his father.
He's still doing something unethical and not protesting.
Why can't she talk directly to her husband?
Oh, the good question. Why couldn't Rivka tell her husband, my dear husband, you're making a big mistake? So first of all, it could be she had spoken to her husband and they disagreed. Believe it or not, there are some husbands and wives who occasionally disagree. It has happened before.
But if he knows his son is a murderer and a thief.
Oh, the better answer is that she knew that if she tells her husband, he would be devastated. It would be so destructive to him that out of love for him, she felt she couldn't tell him. But she had to prevent him from doing something that he would even be more devastated by. If he had given Esav the blessings, and then he discovered that Esav took the blessing, like you give someone $1 million and they flush it down the toilet, you feel really horrible. And this would have been much worse than that. So she knew she couldn't tell him outright, and she never tells him the story. He never knows the story in the end. He doesn't know all the details. What happens in the end? In the end, Esav says, I want to kill my brother. So Rivka says to Yaakov, leave. What does Yitzchak say to Rivka? Says to Yaakov, leave to my brother till your brother's wrath subsides. What does Yitzchak say? Yitzchak says, go to your mother's brothers to get married. Doesn't mention a word about Esav. He doesn't know that Esav wants to kill, because they still wouldn't tell him the truth, because it would be so painful for him to know that he raised a son that he wanted to bless that wants to kill his own brother. So Yitzchak was never fully aware, but the reason he was never fully aware is because he was living in another world. He saw the future. He saw the good in him. He couldn't see the negative. And once we're mentioning that, there's a very bizarre, almost bizarre passage in the Talmud that the Jews in the future, when Mashiach comes, will call Isaac our father, not Avraham and not Yaakov. We're going to put our emphasis on Yitzchak, not Avraham and not Yaakov. And the Gemara, the Talmud explains that when God tells Avraham about the Jewish people, how they're misbehaving, Avraham says, well, let them die. They don't behave, then they deserve their punishment. And Yaakov says the same thing. And Yitzchak says no. Yitzchak said, I had a son like that, and I loved him. You have to love your son. So Yitzchak, by going out of his way to embrace Esav, was paving the way for the ultimate defense of the Jewish people, that God can't harm us even when we don't even when we misbehave, because Yitzchak set the tone for that he loved his son Esav even though he was not such a righteous person, to put it mildly.
Yaakov is knowingly taking part in the fraud.
Yes. Okay. Now, there's 3 points over here. Point number 1. If anyone was troubled by this, it was Yaakov, because Yaakov is identified, his trait is emes, truth. When that means, just like Avram's trait was kindness, and that was his whole being, Yaakov was a piece of truth. Imagine when someone whose life is just truth, exclusively truth, has to tell a lie. So who is the most pained by it? It's Yaakov. But he did it Mesiras Nefesh. What is Mesiras Nefesh? We usually translate as self-sacrifice. Literally means giving over your soul, sacrificing your soul. To sacrifice your body is easy. Sacrificing your soul is hard, relatively speaking. They're both hard, but the soul, compromising a value because of a higher value, is a greater, like Moses shatters the tablets. Why? Because he tried to save the Jewish people by shattering the tablets. That's Mesiras Nefesh. That he sacrificed something holy. What was holy to Moses more than Torah? Nothing. But yet, to save the Jewish people, he said, I will sacrifice my connection to the Torah to save the Jewish people.
Did
That's
he do that without God's permission?
He didn't ask, he just did it. And God said,
he broke the tablets without God's permission?
No, and God said, Yasher Koach, more strength to you.
Yeah.
You did the right thing.
What nerve.
Right. But that was self-sacrifice. He didn't know that God would say it's okay.
I know.
That's called self-sacrifice.
That's incredible.
So what Yaakov was doing was ultimate self-sacrifice because his mother commanded him to do it. Point number 2, if you know there's a thief going around deceiving people, telling people stories and defrauding old people, senior citizens, like you have all these scams, and they're stealing and putting people in the poorhouse, and the only way you could catch them is by a sting operation where you deceive them. Is it all right to deceive?
No.
Yes, it is.
Didn't we learn though with Isaac's brother, half brother, that it's not okay to do that? That God decides to let what's
Ishmael?
Yeah, Ishmael live.
Yeah,
the angels plead.
That's different. Because he said right now he's righteous. Why should I make him die because of something that will happen in the future? But here we're talking about if the only way you could save someone from a deception is by deceiving them, then that's not considered to be a deception, because Yitzchak was deceived. Esav deceived his father. Esav made his father think that he was a good guy, that he was a righteous person. Maybe a little rough and tough, maybe a street boy, maybe not a yeshiva bacher, but he was a good guy. And he was deceiving his father. So Yaakov, through Rivka and Yaakov, were removing the deception, and the only way they can do it without hurting Yitzchak was through a deception. That was allowed. And so that's point number 3, as Rashi points out, Yaakov never said a lie. He tried, even though he was allowed to do what he did it in such a way where everything he said could be interpreted 2 ways. There was no outright lie. And yet, in spite of all that, it compromised Yaakov. Yaakov suffered from it, that his own uncle Lavan deceived him with his wife. What does that mean? That when a righteous person does something that he's allowed to do, and he feels pain while he does it, so he's suffering because of it, and he does it in a way, in the least objectionable way, and he goes to extremes in avoiding it, it still degrades him, because he's so holy and so pure. If Yaakov wouldn't have been the man of truth, if he would be an average person, all of what he did he would have gotten a medal for it, for the brilliance of the way he was able to correct an injustice and reveal the truth. He would have gotten a medal. But because he was so truthful, that was his essence, he suffered. That was his self-sacrifice. He knew he was going to suffer. And we're suffering to this day because of it. Because what happened, because of Rachel and Leah, was a rivalry between two brothers, and a rivalry that ended with Jewish land splitting into two kingdoms, and all the struggles and all the problems and all the divisions. So Yaakov was terrible self-sacrifice. What was the method through which he deceived his father? The method was that he wore his brother Esav's clothing. So when his father would touch him, his father would feel hair.
So that's speech, thought, speech, and action. He thought deceptively. He didn't say anything that was deceptive, but he acted deceptively.
Right. He tried as much as possible not to say anything. His father drew conclusions on his own. Now, Chassidus explains that Rivka was more sophisticated than Yitzchak, just like Sarah was more sophisticated than Abraham. Yitzchak's objective by blessing Esau was to refine him. Yitzchak knew that Esau was no tzaddik. This is a much more honest or accurate way of understanding Yitzchak. Otherwise, Yitzchak didn't seem to be that smart. I mean, we're talking about a man who's over 100 years old, and he has Esau when he was 60 years old. So this is 50, 60. He was close to 120. So you're talking about he's living with his child for 60 years, and he hasn't figured him out yet. No, he knew Esau was not a tzaddik, but he saw that he had that spiritual energy, those sparks of holiness, and he felt that by giving him the blessings, the word bracha means to elicit. That would help him to elicit, to channel that potential into actuality. That was his goal. Rivka was a step ahead of Yitzchak. Rivka also had that same goal. You think she didn't love her son Esav? Of course she loved him. It was her child. But she knew the only way Esav could be refined is through Yaakov. That you have to give the blessings to Yaakov, energize Yaakov. Yaakov will live together with Esav. He'll put on his garments. Yaakov will do the same things that Esav does. Yaakov will not just be Torah student. Yaakov will go out and work for a living and engage in physical activity and do the same things that the Esavs do. But the voice will be the voice of Jacob, which is those are the words that Isaac said. I hear the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esav. But that's also a metaphor that a Jew is the ultimate deceiver. We're called, in slang, the word Jew means deceiver. He Jewed him down.
Jew him.
Right. Well, this in every anti-Semitic charge, there's some truth, which is positive. We are the ultimate deception. Why? Because the non-Jew could look at us and say, well, you have 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, you look normal, you dress normal. Okay, some Hasidim dress a little bit funny, but in general, you dress, you act the same. You also have jobs. You become doctors, lawyers, professors, business people. You engage in the same activities, and you know what? We're absolutely lying to them. We're doing all this to serve God. This is all a cover. This is all the garments of Esav. In fact, the word garment in Hebrew, beged, one of the meanings of it is deception. The garment is a deception. This is not who we really are. We're not who our garments are. So Rivka understood that that's the only way you could change Esav if Yaakov puts on the garments of Esav, lives in exile, and elevates the world. And Esav ultimately will be refined. And when Mashiach comes, it says Esav will finally have a rapprochement with Yaakov, and there will be peace, and they will be refined. Rivka was a step ahead of Yitzchak in that regard.
Is there any sense that women are in Tanakh that women generally are wiser than men?
No.
It was already answered.
Women wiser than men. The women say yes. They're more intuition. The Gemara says they have greater bina, greater understanding, which means they have the ability to draw inferences more than men. For example, if your wife tells you the window is open and she says it's cold outside, what does she want? The man will say, okay, what can I do? I can't make it hot. And the wife says, then shut the window. Say, why didn't you tell me that? The man will say. The man has to hear direct orders. He can't draw inferences.
In 40 plus years as a psychiatrist, my impression is that women have more wisdom than men. The mothers have more wisdom than the fathers do. That's the
Okay, the women definitely agree. Yes, they have that kind of wisdom. They have. Men have more chachma, which is conceptual wisdom, to think of ideas.
I didn't deal with that part.
Okay. Das is also, men have more das than women.
What's das?
Well, that's a separate subject. Stick-to-itedness.
Women are more flexible.
Women are more fickle in their, because they have stronger emotions, which is a positive thing, not a negative, but it could, by the way, every strength that we ascribe to women could also be a weakness, and every strength we ascribe to men, it could also be a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that God created both men and women together. They complement each other. But people who think that men and women are the same, and there's no genetic difference, no real difference, are obviously blind, deceiving themselves.
In the order of evolution,
talking about deception.
The Rebbe says that women come from Malchut.
Right.
What does Malchut represent?
Malchut represents the ability to communicate, to project outwards, to not keep things within, but to be able to translate it into action.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just one final thought. It says that Esav hated Yaakov because of the blessing that his father gave him. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, famous sage of 300 years ago, 300 years ago, says, why does it say he hated him because of the blessing he gave Yaakov? It should have said he hated him because he didn't get a blessing. So he says that's human nature. Famous analogy. Someone comes to the rabbi and asks the rabbi, I just bought an animal. It cost me $1,000. It seems to have a little problem. Is it kosher? And the rabbi says, no, it's not kosher. $1,000 loss. And the Jew accepts it. A week later he comes to the rabbi and says, so-and-so cheated me out of $100. And the rabbi summons the other party, and the rabbi listens to both sides, and the rabbi says, you know what? He doesn't owe you a penny. And you start cursing the rabbi. You were bribed. Why did you rule against me? One second. A week ago I made you lose $1,000 and you didn't complain. Now I only made you lose $100 and you're complaining. He says, yes, but when I lost that animal, my friend didn't get it. But this $100 is not my loss, it's his gain. That I can't tolerate. That a person, that human nature is that we don't get upset by our losses as much as we get upset by someone else's gain. And that's the Esav in us. That's not the kosher way.
Jealousy is strong.
Right, but it should be the other way around. We should be happy that at least someone else got it. Person, let's say you lose your wallet, and you gave up hope. what would you rather have, that it somehow got thrown into the river and that's the end of it, or that someone who needs it, the money, found it? You would rather have someone who needs the money found it. And I got something on WhatsApp, so I'll read it because it was very nice. Which is a little bit the opposite. In our area, this is from Israel, the fires were just over the hill. They were so close that we could feel the heat, cough from the soot and ash, and hear the sirens a lot. It was all anyone talked about. Some were packing and all that. Many parents didn't let the kids out to avoid inhaling whatever chemicals may be in the air. Everyone cursed the Arab arsonists with all their heart. During the height of the action, I went to the local Makolet, that's the supermarket, and stood in with my items. The line, as you can imagine, is long. People are buying cleaners of all sorts because everything is covered in soot. Slicha, excuse me, a guy shouts, but I must go to the front of the line. He's holding a box of toothbrushes and a lot of toothpaste. He said that he only had a half hour off work, and since there was a lot of traffic, we had to let him through quickly. A man wants a bunch of toothbrushes to stock up for the next 10 years. Urgent, you know. Well, one lady told him off. Look, we are all on edge. Did you inhale carbon monoxide or whatever? No. Then stand in line. Here we have no idea whether we will have a home tonight. Even if we have a house, between the planes and the helicopters and the sirens and the smoke, who can sleep? And you need toothbrushes? Turning from him, she said to no one in particular, I guess everyone goes crazy in different ways. I must say that the man was big, very big. If he had wanted to, he could have pushed her and everyone else out of line. Instead, he blushed and somehow drooped his shoulders. He softly replied, I am taking these to the shelter. There are people who only have their purses and a few diapers. Who remembers a toothbrush when you only have 5 minutes to evacuate? Food, drink, and clothes they're getting, but no one thinks about toothbrushes. So I thought I'd take a half hour and get some to make lives more bearable, you know. The line got very quiet and cleared a path for him. As he approached the cashier, the woman who yelled at him came running with all the pacifiers that were on the shelf. Take, she commanded. There are babies. Maybe not everyone has pacifiers. I'll pay for them. Immediately, all the customers abandoned the line and began sweeping items off the shelves. Toothpicks, lighters, even cloths to clean glasses. They dropped everything in the man's basket. Do you have room for more in your car? One person asked as people continued bringing miscellaneous things. Meanwhile, the man just stood there, smiling like a birthday boy who just got a huge surprise. Now I've got this unbearable burning in my nose, and I think to myself, I was in a war. I know what it's like. Besides, I'm grown, married, and all that. But I can't help it. I'm just about to cry. My soul was wide open. We are all one. The man tries to pay something, but the store owner turns him down. My grandfather was a rabbi, he explains, adding, my Zayde would turn over in his grave if I took your money. Go, go. I mean, who could imagine? But that's not the end. In the back of the store stood a Russian. He was as non-Jewish as you can get. He was standing with a carton of milk and